Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another episode of HangarControl with Microsoft Flight Simulator, but today's going to be a bit different because you're going to learn a bit more than just HangarControl. We're going to be talking about RPN scripting, also known as XML scripting or command scripting. There's a bunch of different names out there for it depending on where you see it. But today I'm going to show you guys how to use it now in HangarControl, as this feature will be releasing tomorrow morning with the next update. And we're going to show you guys how it works, and we're going to talk about some of the benefits and some of the formulas and syntax that are necessary to make it work. So hopefully you guys will learn a lot in this video, whether you're into HangarControl or not. So stick around. One app designed to do it all. HangarControl brings everything together: control bindings, hardware configuration, mod and profile management, application launching, add-ons, config files, and more, all managed from a single application. Mods Hanger goes beyond just mods and add-ons. It manages profiles, config files, text files, backups, snapshots, and helps keep your community folders clean and organized. Application Hanger launches your entire SIM stack with a single click. Your Stream Decks are fully controlled through the HangarControl plugin, while all of your other Stream Deck plugins remain active and available. Built by a simmer for simmers, HangarControl adds new features and hardware support every week based on community feedback. It's a one-time purchase with lifetime updates, no subscriptions. You can try it for free for 5 days with no restrictions at overkillsimulations.com. Just create an account, head to your account page, download the latest version, and get started. And if you're looking for in-depth Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft tutorials, check out my Patreon site. Links to HangarControl and Patreon are down in the description below. Alright folks, so first up, the quick recap in case you skipped the intro. If you guys are interested in trying HangarControl out after this video, make sure to go to overkillsimulations.com, create an account first, hit the login button, hit the red account button in the top right, and then hit the red download HangarControl button on the account page to start your 5-day free unrestricted trial, including any updates that release during that time frame, and control your experience. So now let's get into today's video and what it's about. So let's talk about the basic. What the hell is RPN scripting? Well, RPN scripting stands for, or RPN stands for, Reverse Polish Notation. It's a way to write commands that the flight simulator can understand and execute. You might have also heard it again, as we talked before, called XML code or calculator code. They're all the same thing, just different names. Here's the simple version. It lets you write mini programs, essentially, that tell the simulator exactly what to do with your hardware endpoint. Okay? In normal math, you'd write 5 plus 3 equals 8. In RPN, you write the numbers first, then the operation. So 5, 3, plus. Okay, so you take the digits 5, take the digit 3, and then you're telling it to add them together. For Flight Sim, instead of saying set the throttle to 50%, you write 50. Then push to the throttle variable, value first, action second, is how this all comes together. That's it. The core concept: value first, then what do you want me to do with it? Okay, so you're probably thinking again, so now I know what the hell RPN is, why the hell do I need it? You're probably thinking, isn't this what HangarControl and SPAD.NEX and Axes and O's and MobiFlight, they already do this. I hit the drop down list, I find my command, I tell it a variable that I want to put into it. This already is a thing that I do. Well, not exactly. So here's where we're going to point to this comparison table here. With standard bindings in HangarControl, again, or any other binding software, you can do usually the following pretty easily. There are some caveats to this, and there are some workarounds to this, but again, it's to understand that those workarounds are built into the software, but are essentially doing something very similar. So the basics of what it can do without RPN is we can bind a button to a K event like the gear or the lights, and that works. We can bind a button to an LVAR with a fixed value, on or off, or set value 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., and that works. We can bind an axis to a K event like the throttle axis or your mixture or your prop, and that works too. Now again, here's where there's sort of a caveat. Yes, for example, HangarControl now, just like many of the others, can stream an axis from an LVAR or stream an axis from a B event. But trust me, there's a lot of work that goes into making that happen. A lot of this math that we're talking about is done in the background, and it still has some limitations that we'll talk about later on in this video. So in a generalized theory, here's what you can't do by default with these commands. Okay, you can't bind an access to an LVAR with streaming values like we just discussed without some significant work in the background. You can't do math on your access values. You can't trigger multiple events from a single input, again, without things like what we have in SPAD and HangarControl. Okay, you have to go above and beyond as the developer or whoever's creating the backend to make that stuff happen. By default, these values aren't meant to work like that. So that's the gap. Standard bindings can send a fixed value to an LVAR, and they can send an access to a K event, but they can't send or streaming an access to a value or an LVAR by default like inside of the simulator. So guess what? The PMDG 737, like many Payware aircraft, also uses LVARs and K events. When you send a throttle set, the PMDG just ignores it. Okay, so that's why many people are coming up with a lot of problems in binding the 737. Now, there are, again, ways around that and ways to make it work, but it becomes more difficult. RPN scripting bridges that gap. It lets you take your access position, do math on it, and write directly to any LVAR or event that you really want it to write to. Okay. So another thing that I want to talk about that it can do as a perfect example as a use case here, more broader and more, I should say, less broader and more refined to the already built-in features to HangarControl and applications that are similar to it, is take the TBM 930. Okay, the TBM 930, everybody uses the K event, usually throttle 1 set. But when you use it, the RPMs on the engine will absolutely throttle up. The engine power works just fine. But one of the things that has been a known issue with the TBM 930 is that the throttle physical position doesn't move. When you're looking down at the throttle in the cockpit, you don't see it move in correspondence with engine power. The engine power, like I said, does change. You are absolutely able to fly and use it, but as we all know, that can be quite an immersion breaker. There are many other aircraft like that. I believe there's one from Taug's hangar that does something similar with the rudder pedals, where yes, you can still control the aircraft, but you don't get the animation. And this is another point where scripting can fix that and resolve this issue. So now let's learn the actual syntax. And don't worry, it's a lot simpler than it looks. A lot of people start seeing code and they're like, nope, I'm out of here. Just hang tight with me. I want you to make it very clear that before I added this into HangarControl, I also knew nothing about RPN scripting other than its existence. I had to do a lot of research to understand it. And once I started getting into it and realizing what it is, it became a lot simpler. So you have three options. Value 16383 gives you a number from 0 to 16,383. This is what most K events expect. Your throttles, your props, your mixtures, anything that you would put on an axis. Okay. Then you have value percent. Gives you a value obviously between 0 to 100 as a percentage. Great for LVARs that use percentages. And then you have value, gives you 0 to 1. And we can adjust this as well too, but this is normalized. Useful for when you need to multiply to a custom range. So if you set axis at 50%, value 16,383 becomes 8,191. Value percent becomes 50. Value becomes 0.5. Okay? So, to write a value to a variable, you use parenthesis with a greater than sign. So as you can see in our example here, we have our K event with a name that writes to a K event. Then inside the parentheses, we have an LVAR with the name that writes to an LVAR. So first we're telling it where we want it to go. The greater than sign is the key. It means write. Without it, you're reading. So if you were to keep that greater sign out of it before the K, before the L, it would read a value. It would not try to write to a value. So that's the first instruction. Write to XYZ event. So then the pattern is your axis placeholder gets substituted and written to a variable. In the last example window we have here, you can see real examples. Okay, this takes your axis position, converts it to 0 to 16,383. This is what most throttle axes use nowadays, or not even throttle, just most axis, use nowadays, and sends it to the default throttle event, throttle set. Okay, and then you can see here in the second one, now we're talking about this one specifically, would be for your A320. Now this would combine both of them is what this would do. So this would be your Fenix for both throttles on a single axis. And again, don't hold the code necessarily dead on the money, guys. This is meant to be as example. I wrote these from the old brain here, so keep that in mind. But you guys get the idea. Same thing with an LVAR. We would take the value percent in this case, right to the LVAR between 0 and 100%, and that would move the throttle. Okay, we're using these two different values, as the value 16,383 would be for a K event, and we would use the percent for an LVAR. Not to add any more confusion than what's probably already going through, but I want to make it also clear that none of these rules are necessarily always static, meaning that sometimes you can use the different value options on LVARs or B events or K events, whatever it may be. These are just meant to be in examples to give you guys understand how to write them, how to build them, so you can further explore and expand in your flight sim binding experience. So next up, before we get into real world examples here, we have the math operations. And here's where it gets powerful. What if the target range doesn't match your placeholder? So you have the PMDG 737 throttle uses L switch 68373X. And honestly, again, making that up, guys, you guys are going to see the 737 in the live demo here in just a minute. But let's say it expects a range of 0 to 500. But value percent only gives you 0 to 100. Solution, we multiply it. So we're going to read the code here. If you take a look at it very closely, let's break it down. We have our value like we talked before. But now we want to multiply that value because we need 500%, not 100%. Now remember the rules here. Remember the value, then what do you want me to do with it? So in this case, we want to multiply it by 5. So we put the 5 in. And then just like before when we had the plus after the value, we use an asterisk as multiply. Then in our parentheses, the command itself. We have the greater than caret, which tells us to write to the L switch 68373X LVAR, which will then give us our 0 to 500 percentile range. Okay, so now we've got the axis range that we needed in order to take full advantage of the axis range provided in the aircraft. So if your axis is at 50%, value percent becomes 50 times 5 equals 250, which then gets written to the LVAR perfect. Okay? Now, but what if when I tested this, the throttle moved backwards? Full forward on my physical throttle meant idle in the sim. So essentially our axis needed to be inverted. This is just as easy. So to invert, the only thing we're going to do is a minus sign in front of the value. We are dedicating the value now as a negative versus a positive, or identifying, excuse me. So once again, real quick, we take the 100, the value percent, then minus 5, then your multiply, and again your command. This takes 100, subtracts your percentage, then multiplies it by 5. So the 30% becomes 70 times 5 equals 350 flipped. Okay, so that's how you would invert an axis or invert a command. Remember, in RPN, operators come after both values. So 100 minus value percent is written as 100 value percent, then your minus sign. Takes some getting used to, but it is consistent across all commands. Okay, so I apologize. There was one more slide before we get moving. I forgot about this one. So here's another one of the superpowers, if you will, of one input that can trigger multiple actions. So we're going to point here and take a look at the twin engine throttle example. So let's say you have a twin engine aircraft and only one physical throttle lever. With RPN, you can control both engines. We can do value 16383, then write to K throttle 1 set, and then take value 16383 and write to throttle 2 set, all in a single line. And then you will have both of your throttles operating on the same axis. So two statements in one script, they execute from left to right. So if you're ever looking for a sequence that has to go in a particular order, it reads the same way that we read and write, from left to right. So first engine 1, then engine 2. But it happens from your eyes, and the action, the sim, will be on a simultaneous level. Okay? So again, going back to the PMDG, for the PMDG 737, if you want one lever to control both throttles, it would be 100, because we need to invert, value percent, the -5, times the LVAR command, then 100 again, value percent, or -5, times the command for throttle 2. Notice that throttle 2 is 686, throttle 1 is 683. But one physical lever, both virtual throttles will move together. So now this works also for button 2. Gear up and unlock the lever guard in one press. So you could do, for example, 1, gear up, that's the value we are setting for the gear, 0, L, switch overhead gear lock. Okay, so two actions, one button. The rule is simple. Put multiple statements in the script and they execute from left to right. That's the basic round of this to go through. And by the way, if you guys need to, I highly recommend taking screenshots of these slides, as they may help you as a reference later on. All right, so enough of the theory. Let's go ahead and do this live. We're going to bind my Honeycomb Bravo to the 737 throttle quadrant using only RPN scripting. Now, I want to make it clear that you don't always have to use RPN scripting. And for most use cases, especially with the powerful softwares that are out, again, HangarControl, SPAD, MobiFlight, etc. Okay, for a lot of these, you don't need them. Usually it's an individual use case or a specific use case for things such as, like I said, the TBM 930 throttle issue, which actually I determined today, just for the record, is a B event now in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. If you find the B event, the throttle moves on its own. Or if you have a specific aircraft, like I mentioned earlier, there's one of the aircraft in Taug's hangars where the rudders won't work. They will work, but they don't. The animation doesn't work unless you do this. So this may not be something that you ever use. It may be something that you use the living you-know-what out of. So let's go ahead and get through it. So you guys can see all the commands that we're going to use today, assuming that I got these right. We have the left throttle, the right throttle, the spoiler, the left reverser, the right reverser, and the flaps. Okay, so now we're going to go into HangarControl and we're going to set these up and we're going to walk through each binding one by one. We're going to do first the left throttle. We'll create a new axis binding and select the Bravo lever. And we'll walk through everything, working all the way down through that as you guys see everything in action one at a time. All right, folks, so as we get into this, I want to make sure you guys understand a few things right out of the bat. So just like we talked about previously, we're going to be adjusting the animations. That was the sort of the theme behind this whole thing, was just, you know, that was one of the common things that comes up is, hey, my rudders are working, but the animation, the pedals aren't working, right? So what you guys are going to see me addressing here is the animations, okay? We are not going to actually be sending commands to the engines, to the flaps, to the spoilers, whatever we end up doing here today. Okay, I am going to show you guys that later on in the video, so stay tuned for that. I am using the 737-800 as an example, but this is not the way that you need to go about to bind the 737-800. Now, to touch on that real quick, the PMDG 737-800 uses, for the most part, basic SimConnect commands, and it's a lot easier to bind than you think it is. And I will be showing you guys that. At least that's for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So again, everything you guys are going to see right now for this first segment is is just moving the animation. It's addressing the animation. We are not actually if you use these commands, if you skip ahead and say, oh, I got it, now I'm going to go and do this, and you go to push your throttles forward and the throttle lever moves, but the engines don't spool up, that's why. All we're doing is the animations. So first, let's get right into how do you find the animation when you're struggling to figure that out. You want to make sure you go into your settings in Microsoft Flight Simulator, go to Advanced, turn Dev Mode on, go to your Tools, go to the Behaviors. And with inside the Behaviors, we're going to come in here and actually, okay, sorry about that. I had to go into the settings controls and deactivate my Bravo, since Microsoft Flight Simulator always likes to tell me what I want to do with my controls and doesn't save that. Anyway, little piss moment there. So what we're going to do with the behavior tools open is I'm going to move this over just a little bit. I'm going to just click. See, once you've clicked on something, you'll get what you need. So just click on it and hit left Control and G, and then on your behaviors window, you now have what we're looking for. So the mouse interaction is all this stuff down here. This is what actually actuates the controls, but it's even simpler than that. So disregard that for that too. Don't try to use any of these to actually manipulate the throttles. You don't need to, at least for this aircraft. Animations. Here's what we're looking for right here. So there's our LVAR, switch 68373X. That's all we're interested for this particular portion. Okay, now we're going to go into our control bindings. I'm going to make sure our service is started. And I believe I might already have a binding. Yep, let's go ahead and just clear that. You guys didn't see anything. This is not the command you were looking for. And that is because the reason why we're doing this is because this is my, I think, 4th time recording this, because for one reason or the other, I kept forgetting to hit record, or I thought it was recording and it wasn't. Anyway, digress. So now let's go ahead and let me get some of this stuff off the screen here. So now we don't need this anymore. We know what our value is. Now, actually, let me bring that up one more time. The important thing to pay attention to is we have 100% of 500. 500 is the maximum value for the animation. That's going to come important later on. So keep those numbers in mind. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come in here and we need to, first, what do we want to do? We want to, with an open brace, not a parentheses, but a brace, we want to adjust the value %. Close the brace. And then what are we wanting to do with that value? Which action are we wanting to adjust? We're going to go parentheses. We want to use the greater than symbol to write. We're going to be writing to an LVAR. And we are writing to switch underscore, LVARs don't use spaces, 683 underscore 73X. Close the parentheses. So now we're going to hit save. Now, when we move the throttle, let me move some of this stuff out of the way. We're a little too close here. By the way, the lagging that you're seeing is because I have the always on top on HangarControl. If, for example, if I move this off just so that you guys can see it, it moves nice and smooth. Okay, it's just because, oop, damn it. I'm on a roll today. I'm having a rough night. Anyways, if I move that back on, you might see it lag a little bit, but it's just because HangarControl is sitting on top. Anyways, but you can see we're only getting about 20%. Now remember what we adjusted. This is using 100% of the axis, but we're only adding 100% movement when there's a total of 500 value, right? So we need to adjust that. So by going back into our Bravo, we're going to go back to our axis. We're going to come back in here. We need to adjust some things. So first off, we want to take the value of 100, take the value %, and we need to multiply it by 5, right? We're only moving about 20%. There's a total of 500. We know that percentage only goes from 0 to 100, right? So we need to take that 100%, the value % operates by a default of 100, So we're going to take that 100 value percent and we need to multiply it by 5. But remember what we talked about earlier. You take your value first. So we're going to go 5. And then we need to add an asterisk, but we need to do a space. It's not right after the other. Take the 5, new action, multiply it, okay, with the asterisk, and that's what we want with the lvar command. All right, so now after we save that, we move our throttle forward. Great. So now we're getting the full range of motion, but now we're still only getting the axis in the wrong direction. So now let's fix that last piece. So to fix that last piece, we're going to come right in here. We're going to add a space, make sure there's a space between everything, and we're just going to simply add a minus sign. Now it's very important to remember, in the minus sign does not mean subtract in this particular thing. In scripting, it means invert. Simply means reverse the action first, then do your math. Okay, so when we hit save now, we get it going in the correct direction. But now it's very important also to remember two things. First off, this is all not necessary for the 737-800 for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. I will do a separate video on binding your primary controls for the 737-800 after this video is made. There's been a request for that. So if you happen to be looking for that, this is way overkill. See what I did there? For this particular process. I'm simply showing an example, and the 737-800 is what I decided to use as my example. Point number 2 is that remember all we did was adjust the movement. That's why, or the animation. That's why we are not hearing that that we should get with a takeoff config warning if the throttle was at full forward in the current state the aircraft's in. Because we are not actually sending anything to the engine. All we're doing is moving an animation. That is it. We are manipulating an animation that is available within this particular aircraft, but we are not actually sending any kind of engine command to the plane. We need to add that. So let's go ahead and do that next. All right, so you guys get kind of a bonus here, okay? But if we needed to add a separate command, here's how we would do this, okay? If you had to do the animation fix first, okay, here's what we're going to do. Now, I'm going to warn you, you guys are going to see something very weird that doesn't add up, and there's a reason for it, okay? So what we're doing here is we are going to... I'm just going to copy and paste this time. We are adding this second section here, but I also think we do need 16.383 if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on this part. Again, I'm still learning myself, although I've gotten pretty confident with it. But we're going to go ahead and hit save, and I'm going to show you guys something. See how it's bouncing, okay? And that's because there is a slight delay in this particular scenario because the command that we are using, let's go back and look at our command, is kThrottle1set. That is a SimConnect event, and that SimConnect event also handles the animation. Okay, so remember the idea behind this fix, and this is why I told you that we were just using the PMDG 737 as an example, but that this was not necessary for this aircraft, was because of this behavior. You've got two events that essentially are doing the same job. So let me show you real quickly how to fix this. And for those of you who are wondering, this is exactly how you handle the axis in the 737-800. And you can literally just use the SimConnect picker dialog also. You don't have to use the scripting. It's totally up to you. Your SimConnect command is throttle 1 and throttle 2 set using the axis range. But let's just do it like this. We're going to hit save. And you can see now we get perfect response. Now let me show you guys something because I know somebody probably wondering about this. Notice how much smoother it is now. I just want to talk about what we were talking about earlier. It's because I have HangarControl sitting on top, and for whatever reason, Microsoft Flight Simulator doesn't like that. If I move it off, it's smooth as glass. But so that's how you actually execute the command correctly. And that first method I showed you, how we had two commands there. I'm going to put that back up there for a minute. Just for demonstration purposes, this is how you would add it if you needed both commands. If you had a command that needed to address engine power in this particular example and one to handle the animation, this is how you would do it. You simply put a space and start the process over again with the correct values, animation, or trigger, etc., whatever it may be. Okay, so this is how that all comes together. All right, I'm going to show you guys one more real quick. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the spoiler, just as an example, of the speed brake. So again, let's just take this same one here, and tools, behaviors. I'm going to move this over a little bit. Sometimes the always on top can be a pain in the ass, but it really does help. So again, coming back over here, you can see what we've got. Okay, so now it's showing 25%. Now if I move that out of the way for a second, it shows 0%. So you can do the 0 to 100% just like we did before, or it's also got the different values. We're going to keep this very, very easy for this particular one. And we're simply just going to do what we did with our value here in this particular situation that we did before. So we're going to take our LVAR that we used for the throttle, and we're simply going to change the value. 679 is what we're looking for in this particular situation. We can see, we know that the value was from 0 to 100. You do have a 6% or 6 value hit here, but we don't need to worry about that in this particular scenario because we're just telling it to use 100% of the axis range. We've already got our inversion here, so if we activate it, you can see we follow suit all the way down through the remainder of the axis. So that's a real short and dirty way to show you guys how this all works. The same thing works for button commands. You just have to define the variables that you need. Again, if you guys have any questions about this, I highly recommend joining the Discord. A link to my Discord is in all of my YouTube videos, certainly down below this one. It's also on the website at overkillsimulations.com. And I hope you guys consider giving HangarControl a shot. We are certainly constantly updating and bringing up new pieces. So I hope to see you guys in the Discord. You can always reach out to me direct as well. Until next time, folks, stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.